DeeJae Cox, and you're listening to California Woman 411 right here on KPTR 1450 AM. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've heard many times that it's vital in your life to have people that inspire you to do great things. Role models are critical. And my motto has always been, don't tolerate anyone who tears you down and tells you that you can't do it. Always look for people to show you how to be more than you ever dreamed you could be. And so for that very reason, I am so excited to introduce you to my first guest today. Her name is Valerie Alexander. Valerie, how are you?
Hi, DeeJae. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm so glad to be talking to you. I'm thrilled to call Valerie a friend. Because she is so inspirational to me. She's a screenwriter and a director and a producer, and our projects are just numerous. And I'm going to let her delve into all the amazing work that she's done. But uniquely, prior to making the filmmaker career choice, she was also a securities lawyer, an investment banker, an internet executive, and she served as a visiting professor teaching representation of law and film at Berkeley Law School, and she continues to lecture at colleges and films across the country with her entertaining talk, How Women Can Succeed in Hollywood Despite Having Female Brains. And most recently, Valerie has taken a slight departure from her usual pursuits and has written an incredible book called Happiness is a Second Language. And you know what? We all certainly want to learn that language. So, hey, Valerie, welcome to the show. And I guess my first question for you is, my God, how do you do all of this, and how have you accomplished all of this?
I have to say, I love you for that introduction, by the way. Thank you. But I'm also listening to that bio and thinking, wow, I seem to have a really short attention span.
Well, I think you're just brilliant, and you just go on to new pursuits. That's okay.
Oh, well, thank you. My life as a securities lawyer, an investment banker, and a venture capital consultant, and all of that in the Silicon Valley during the first internet gold rush. I don't want to reveal my age, but it was in the late 90s. And
that's okay. You only look 25, so I don't know how old you really are.
But there were so many opportunities. If you knew what you were doing and you could run a deal pretty effectively, everyone in the room tried to hire you because they all needed employees. It was the internet boom of the 90s took everyone by surprise. There weren't enough lawyers or investment bankers or executives to fill the need at the time. And so I quickly transitioned from one to the other, and I loved doing all of that. And then my mom got ill, and she was back in Indiana, and I didn't really have any ties to the Silicon Valley. I didn't have a need to be there, and I just thought, you know what, I want to be with my mom. So it was the summer of 2000. I sold my house. I gave away all my furniture. I just got rid of most of everything I owned, and I went back to Indiana for a year to take care of my mom. And she's 100% better. She's fully recovered.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. But
yeah.
I think that just to go off on a tangent for a moment, I think that is something that we all have to deal with. Most of us do at some point in our lives, is caring for our parents. And I think that that's a really brave choice to make, but one that's necessary. And my hat's off to you for making that choice.
Well, thank you. And particularly women. We are much more put in that situation than men are, and we have to figure out what we're going to do. But I firmly believe that the universe finds ways to put us in the position we need to be in. I will just put it that way. And so I, like I said, sold my house, sold my car, got rid of everything in the summer of 2000, took care of my mom for a year, and then when it was time for me to get back to my life, it was the summer of 2001. And now the internet bubble had burst. So it was, I like to say, in my absence, the Silicon Valley collapsed.
It was because of you, Valerie, because you left, and they just didn't know what to do with your absence.
Yes. But so what I did is I looked at the whole landscape, and I had a decent little nest egg. By that point, I was able to pay off my student loans and have a few dollars in the bank. So I said, okay, if I want to do something with my life, that totally starting new. And I thought, I want to make movies. And it was the strangest thing. I didn't know a single person in Los Angeles. I had a friend from law school who lived in Pasadena. So I camped on her couch for 3 weeks while I found a place to live, and then I just started writing screenplays.
That's a big leap from law school to filmmaker.
It was. And I was completely unqualified for it. My first 3 scripts were awful.
Well, you seem to fake it well, so that's good news.
Thank you. So after I luckily one of the greatest things I was ever blessed with is self-awareness, and I wish I could touch every person and magically give them self-awareness, because it's one of the greatest gifts in the world. And
how do you define that, just as out of curiosity? How do you define self-awareness?
Knowing what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Knowing what you're doing that is hurting you in your pursuits, and knowing what you're doing that is helping you in your pursuits. Knowing how the other people in the world are reacting to you, being aware of how you're perceived, and whether or not that's how you want to be perceived. And
that's huge. I mean, because
yes,
I think that can determine the whole course of your life.
It really can, and we all know people who just have no idea how the world sees them. And this is in the book, Happiness as a Second Language. Happiness is broken down as learning a new language, and one of the chapters is on adjectives. And this is essentially the chapter about self-awareness, which is look at the adjectives you want to be described by and figure out if you're actually doing that with your life.
And
go ahead.
How did you arrive at that? I mean, and I definitely want to talk about your book, because it's incredible, and it's one of those books that I'm going to suggest everybody read, and I wanted you to tell them how to buy it and all that stuff. But before we actually delve into the book, tell me, how did you arrive at that place in your life where you had that inner knowledge?
I honestly don't know. I wish I could answer that question, but I will say this. I've been very, very lucky at various times in my life to get a piece of feedback exactly when I needed it, and to be able to hear it. There was an incident in college. I was in an organization, and there was another woman in the organization, and she and I just clashed. We've all been there, where you're on a committee or you're doing something. There's just one person that if you say red, she says blue.
Yeah.
And that was this other woman and I. And there was a meeting where we literally screamed at each other. And I stormed off, and I wrote her this nasty letter telling her all the things that she was wrong about, everything she had been wrong about for the previous 2 years, blah, blah, blah. And she wrote me back a letter that didn't address a single one of my points. She didn't even acknowledge that I had written her a letter. Her letter to me was about all the ways I was sabotaging myself in this organization. And the last line of her letter was, if you would just try to be a member of this club instead of always needing to be its leader, you would realize that everybody would just follow you anyway.
Wow, that's pretty profound.
It was super, for a 20-year-old woman, it was so profound. And I read it, and as soon as I read it, I knew what she was saying, and I knew that she was right. And I got very lucky. I went and found her. We went to Trinity in San Antonio. It's a very small campus, and you kind of know where everybody is all the time. I went and found her, and I said, thank you. You have changed my life. And here's a very funny thing. That woman very recently sent me a note that she got the book and had read it, and I sent her back and said, the story on pages 88 and 89 is about you. And she had no idea. She didn't remember having written that, and she said, wow, that was some great advice I gave you. I wish I followed it, which I kind of love, too.
Well, I think it takes those kind of people in our lives, to hopefully, if we're open to those lessons, to develop self-awareness. We encounter people, good or bad, and sometimes they bring out the best in us, and sometimes they bring out the worst in us. But either way, I think if we are open to it, we walk away with a little bit more self-awareness.
And I agree with that, and I try to tell people all the time, feedback is always good. If somebody's giving you feedback, you may hate the words they're using, but stop and figure out what they're saying. If somebody says to you, hey, it really offends me that you roll your eyes every time I speak up, that's really valuable feedback.
Have you been talking to my sister?
Oh, sorry.
I'm kidding.
Stop and think what you're bringing to the universe. And if you think someone is an idiot, you're free to think that. You don't need to convey it to that person, and you don't need to convey it to the world every time you're around that person, because honestly, that doesn't make you look good.
Well, I'm one of those people that believes that you really, and I've learned this as I've grown older, not that I'm old, but...
No, you are not.
No, I'm not old yet. But one of the things I've really learned is to be aware of the people that you have in your life, because everybody will teach you something, but there are also those people that will just take you in directions you don't want to go, and maybe bring out things in you that really you don't want brought out. Some people do just bring out the worst in others. And so I've become much more selective about the people that I have in my life, and people that inspire me and people that motivate me, such as you, and I'll tell you that forever, because you and I have had some amazing conversations, and I always walk away feeling good. So you definitely speak happiness as a second language.
Oh, you do. That's so lovely. Thank you.
But anyway, getting back to your career here and your path, were you always a writer? I mean, was that always a part of who you identified yourself as?
It's interesting because I didn't really think of myself that way. My undergraduate degrees are in economics and environmental science. And then my law degree was a specialization in environmental law, and then I also did a master's in environmental economics. I was a big tree hugger and a math wonk. And when I started practicing law, I wound up in corporate law instead of environmental law. And it's interesting because I noticed that the writing of various, like we wrote prospectuses for companies that were going public. I was one of the lead attorneys for E-Trade when they went public. And pretty quickly in the process of drafting those documents, the writing deferred to me. Everybody would just say, well, leave it to Valerie to write that paragraph or to convey that. And I hadn't really thought about it, but I naturally was a very effective writer. And when I say naturally, my father is a professional technical. He was an engineer for like 30 years, but he then transitioned to technical writing. And he's an exceptional writer. There's a funny acknowledgement in the book where I thank my father for his remarkably helpful copy edit, which was not requested. I sent them. My dad is a little bit Asperger's-y, and when I sent him the book, I said, "Dad, I need you to read this. You're mentioned in here. I don't want your feelings to be hurt. Let me know what you think of it." And he literally sent me back a red-lined copy edit.
Well, you know what? Every writer needs that, though. We just need those editors.
So helpful. I was very grateful for it.
I can see that. This is DeeJae Cox, and you're listening to California Woman 411. And if you're just tuning in, I am talking to Valerie Alexander, who is a writer, a producer, a director, a filmmaker, a former attorney. I mean, just all kinds of good stuff. So Valerie, let me ask you, when you started writing for film, did you find that to be a huge leap from the previous writing you had been doing? How did you make that transition?
It is a huge leap, and one of the big differences between writing as a lawyer and writing as a screenwriter is volume. As a screenwriter, you want as few words on the page as possible, and you want things to be unsaid, which is the exact opposite of writing as a lawyer. So, as I said, my first 3 scripts, terrible, and luckily I got feedback that told me that, and I decided to take a class in screenwriting. I took Intro to Writing at UCLA. And
yeah, I was involved in that writing program.
And it was part of the extension.
Yeah.
And after that, in the course of that class and afterwards, I wrote a script that changed everything. It got me managers, it got me agents. CAA was my agents, which are one of the bigger, places in town. And then I started my career, and so I got a lot of very good opportunities after having written the one powerful script. It has never gotten made. This is one of the things, if you're going to go into the entertainment industry, you have to just learn how to not be in love with a single project.
Well, especially in film. I mean, I think film is very harsh. You know me, I'm a theater person, and I tend to think that it's night and day between writing for film and writing for theater.
Well, in writing for theater, you're the most important element.
That's why I like being a playwright. I love being a playwright because it's about me.
I will say, people often ask me if I miss practicing law. And I say, well, what I miss most is being the most important person.
Yes.
It was great. When I was the lawyer, it didn't matter what everybody else was talking about. I still had the final say.
That's right.
When I'm the writer, the screenwriter, nobody cares.
You're lucky if you recognize it once it's up.
Right.
Well, let's talk about women. Let's talk about women in film.
Oh, yeah. It's such a disappointing statistic. I gave the talk I give, which is how women can succeed in Hollywood despite having female brains. It's a lot more about being crew or being executive or being a director. But the fact that 7% of all studio movies in the past 4 to 5 years have been directed by women. 7.
That's tragic.
That's so disappointing. And part of it is based on how Hollywood works in terms of hiring. And men are willing to hire their friends. And women are afraid to do this. We're somehow afraid, if I only hire my friends, I'm going to get a bad reputation or it will be held against me.
Mm-hmm.
But, man, I didn't know this until I got married. I married a man who's a producer, and then I saw how he and his friends behave.
Mm-hmm.
When one of his friends becomes the president of production somewhere, the first thing he does is sits down and opens up his address book and calls all of his friends and says, hey, do you have a project for me? I'm the president of production now.
Well, it's the good old boys club, and men have historically been very good at creating that and building that for themselves and their acquaintances and friends.
And we need to do that, and we need to not fear retribution for that. If a woman gets a executive job, she should be calling her friends and saying, I have a job now, I can hire you.
I completely agree.
Women are so afraid of being perceived as biased or being... Only women feel when they get a new job that they might be an imposter.
Yes.
And
they're going to find out I can't really do this.
Right. Oh, no. Well, someone's going to walk in. I felt this, the entire time I was practicing law. I felt like someone was going to walk in my office one day and say, you don't belong here.
You're a fraud.
You're a fraud. And men never feel that way. In fact, a man can be a total fraud and never feel that way. A man who never went to law school could have sat in the office next to me and think, yeah, I'm qualified to do this.
I can do this, yeah.
No problem.
Well, they say that that's half the battle. I mean, you just have to say, I can do this.
Well, also, in the workplace, this is a really fascinating fact. In the workplace, confidence and competence are perceived as the exact same thing. So a man who is confident in his work can be completely incompetent, and he will still be perceived by his colleagues and his superiors as being competent. And a woman who is completely competent but lacks confidence in her work will be perceived as incompetent.
You know what? I'm going to write that down. I'm going to email you after this is over and get you to send me that in an email so I have it in writing.
It's a terribly dangerous thing that we do to ourselves. And let me just say something else to all the women who are listening. If you're in the workplace, stop talking about your hair and your weight.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. It completely undermines your authority.
I totally agree with you. Listen, Valerie, I want to get back to your book here for a minute because it's so crucial. You've written this amazing book, Happiness as a Second Language, a guidebook to achieving lasting permanent happiness. Now, I think this is a language we all want to speak, and I want to know how did you write this book? How did this come to you?
It started a few years ago. My husband and I were going through some very, very difficult times on a number of fronts, involving family issues, involving financial issues, and the biggest difficulty is we were trying to start a family and we weren't succeeding. And at one point he said to me, I can't believe you're still just so happy. He said, I can't believe you can be happy while we're going through all of this. And I turned and I said, yeah, it's kind of strange. It's not even my native language.
Ah.
And as soon as I said it, I knew, that's right, it's not. I did have to learn how to be happy under all circumstances. This is one of the things, in Happiness as a Second Language, I had two main goals. One was I wanted it to be for everybody. anybody. It doesn't matter what your income is. It doesn't matter what your situation is. If you have a maid and a housekeeper and live in a mansion, or if you're living in a week-to-week hotel room with your 3 children, you can still do all of the exercises in Happiness as a Second Language. It is not dependent on circumstances. And that was really important to me.
That's very important. Very, very, very important. Well, how does someone buy this book? If I had already purchased my copies for myself and all my friends, how would I buy this book?
Well, thank you. Amazon is the best way. Amazon is the best way to get a copy. And I have a special announcement because the audiobook just came out. So the audiobook is now available, and that's being really well received. And I'm very excited about that because I'm the narrator, and I was extremely nervous about putting myself out there in that way. I'm not a performer. And so to have narrated my own audiobook, I was really afraid, but it's gotten very nicely reviewed. But to celebrate the launch of the audiobook, the ebook is on sale for 99 cents.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And it is never going to be this price again. Now is the time to buy it. It will be on sale until October 31st on Amazon. So you can get a print copy of the book. And I have to say, this has happened a lot. People buy the ebook and they buy the print copy afterwards because they want a reference material. They want something that they can grab and make notes in, or that they can go to a specific page. So the print copy of the book is, I think, it's $9.99 normally. I think Amazon has that on sale right now as well. But the ebook is only 99 cents until October 31st, and it will never be that price again. So now is absolutely the time for people to buy that. And then if they want the audiobook as well, if you want that to listen to in the car, there's a lot of bonus material in the audiobook.
Right.
There's additional tips, and there's some clarifications, and there's also some articles that I've written on happiness and other outlets that are included in the audiobook. So it has those bonuses. And one of the bonuses is about how to stay happy during a frustrating commute. And
living in Los Angeles, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And one of the tips in there is have an audiobook in your car that you're going to enjoy listening to.
I could keep talking to you all day long. I'm going to wrap this up, and I just want to tell you, first of all, what's your website?
Oh, speakhappiness.com.
Speakhappiness.com. Okay. This is Valerie Alexander, who is the author of Happiness as a Second Language, which can be purchased on Amazon, or you can go to speakhappiness.com. And Valerie, thank you so much for being with me today. I just really appreciate talking to you, and you and I can go on for days. So
yeah.
I'm going to wrap this up, and thank you for being here. And this is DeeJae Cox, and you're listening to California Woman 411.
Oh, DeeJae, it was a pleasure.
Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you soon. And stay with us. We'll be right back with another amazing guest.